Good morning, Vikings fans. I am I am your host of Morning Joes. This is Morning Joes. I am the first Joe, Joe Johnson. I am the owner of PurplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. I also host the Purple Journal podcast with the other Joe, Mr. Joe Oberle, who writes for the same sites and additionally the Sports Post. And oh man,
you're the first Joe. I think I was born before you, dude. Well,
I'm aging
quickly
at a very high rate. I think the best way to sum up the roller coaster of emotions that occurred on Sunday was, I think you said, am I going to have to talk you off a ledge on Tuesday? And, at the time, I was telling people, like, other writers that, I felt strangely validated just in that it felt to me, especially at the time, that the game came down to my longtime nemesis, Laquan Treadwell, and then Daniel Carlson, who was a rookie kicker. I've talked about this in articles. It just didn't seem to, with everything on the line, the idea of bringing in a rookie kicker, based on the Blair Walsh effect that happened a couple years ago, just seemed like a risk that they didn't need to incur. But yeah, I just wanted your, Joe, your gut reaction to the game, and also just to see how you're doing. Sounds like you're a little under the weather.
I am a little bit, but we'll soldier through. I mean, you gotta play 60 minutes. That's how long the show is, isn't it? So yeah, but you're not exactly a glass half full guy, are you, Joe?
I threw the glass against the wall a long time ago.
I went two ways. I mean, I had people texting me saying, I don't care how this game turns out, what a game, and it was exciting to watch just because of the back and forth, but there were so many mistakes and misplays and weird things and bad calls that, if you really analyzed it, it wasn't that great a game. It just had plenty of drama and a lot of excitement. I still wanted to win. That's what I said. It's like active, so you always want the Vikings to win. And, if I look at it objectively now, they should have lost. They should have lost in
big time
when Crosby hit that field goal. They should have lost before when Cousins threw that interception that was called back by the penalty on Clay Matthews. They should have lost a number of times. They should have lost after that first half in which they gave up a block kick for a touchdown. And I enjoyed the drama the second half. I enjoyed the comeback when Cousins and crew were just filleting that defense, and seeing the Vikings defense thwart the Rodgers and the Packers so many times.
Yeah.
So, it's really funny in this game. It comes down to both teams had a chance to win, both teams had a chance to lose, and neither of them accomplished it. But we always look back at where the Vikings, your own team, failed, and so then you're pissed off about that. But ultimately, I thought I heard what's his name, Kyle Rudolph, say afterwards, and I thought he summed it up pretty good. It's a tie. Everybody wanted to win. Of course, he wanted to win. It doesn't feel great, but he says the bottom line is that we're tied with the Packers, with them coming to our house, and you can. If they win that game, they have the tiebreaker with them, which could be huge to the division near the end of the season. So, you take it for what it is. I think the Packers and Vikings have tied 3 other times in the history of their
yeah, I don't recall any. I only really remember one overtime game, and I think that was the one where I forget the receiver, maybe it was Freeman. He dove out and the ball hit him in the back, and Chris Dishman was covering him, and he rolled over, and he basically just got up and ran in for the touchdown. But I don't think in my lifetime that I can remember they've ever tied.
Yep, I think one was 10-10 or 3-3. It was just as dull as dirt game. Well, this one was 29-29, so there was a lot of excitement. It was a lot of fun. That's my gut reaction. I'm okay with it, but and for oft times bitter about it, but hey, they didn't lose, so I'll take that.
That's exactly it. And I look at it this way, and this might be me pretending like I know things that I don't. But after I calm down a little bit, and this is why I'm happy I don't do a post-game show because I get so worked up. My biggest fear with Carlson was that he was going to blow the season in a way, like a Blair Walsh way. So for me, looking at them cutting him yesterday, kind of is like, okay, they didn't lose, they got a tie. Obviously, the division is still in play, or it's not super hard for them to win the division, and they, at least I'll put it this way, they seemingly upgraded tremendously at the position.
You make a good point bringing up Blair Walsh, because I think that really factored into the decision. They sat and tried to milk his confidence along after that failed playoff kick against Seattle, and they stuck with him for a while trying to make it work, and he was gone. His confidence was shot. And so when Carlson said in the post-game interview that it was confidence, I think that was just the final straw. It said he is out of here.
Didn't he say it was overconfidence, though? Like, I thought I saw a quote from him saying, I was overly confident on the 35-yarder. I need to make that kick. But I think I interpreted that as him saying, like, I didn't make any adjustments because I was confident I could make the kick.
I don't know. I didn't hear that. I thought he said that it was a lack of confidence is why he's missing 3 field goals.
That would make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But, the guy they're bringing in, Dan Bailey, is one of the best kickers in NFL history. I'm not necessarily sure why, maybe outside of contracts, that the Cowboys would replace him with a guy who's never kicked a regular season field goal, especially with just how up and down kicking has been this last few seasons. But that, like I said, it's got to be a net upgrade at the position. The guy, I think his percentage at home is like 92%. He's never missed an extra point at home. He's obviously good in domes. So, I mean, that's, for me, honestly, like, and this is perhaps too much information, but ever since Blair Walsh started getting a little flaky, my tradition is every time the Vikings kick a field goal, I go outside to smoke a cigarette. And then I wait to hear if my dad is silent or if he's angry, and then I know what happened. And I feel like bringing in a guy, like, had they brought in, like, Robbie Gould last season, it's just less yippy just based on the sample size. So I feel like it's something I don't need to be as worried about. But I was kind of surprised that they didn't go. Everyone seemed to assume that they would go back to Forbath. I'm not sure. Obviously they moved on from him, and that implies they didn't like him for whatever reason. Extra points.
Or Forbath said, "The hell with you."
That could be it too. That really, yeah.
There's plenty of other opportunities out there. Greg Zerline from Los Angeles didn't get any points for me on my fantasy team. Cost me a loss this weekend, which I'm very bitter about. He pulled his groin right early in the game.
Didn't you score the most points known to man this week? Or was that a different league?
Different league. And they, Cleveland cut their kicker loose after him missing 4 kicks on Sunday, and so maybe he probably said, it's probably not good for me to go back. I don't even know if they contact him, but with Dan Bailey out there, you're right. I mean, there's a guy who's not hurting for confidence. He's not, he's got a track record. He's, in his in his 30s, and
yep.
You touched on the contract thing. That's what Jerry Jones said. He wanted $3 million, and they didn't have the cap space, so they had a younger kicker that's coming in, and that team is still, the Cowboys are still a little ways away from, so they can afford to go with the younger guy. The Vikings were, you said this in our shows, a lot during the preseason about why are the Vikings doing this with a new kicker? It was truly an unknown. They must have fallen in love with his strong leg, because the battle he had with Forbath was pretty even. I mean,
Yeah.
and they kind of made their mind up that let's look towards the future, and but it's a team that. A team that is got Super Bowl aspirations can't have a bulky kicker, and apparently his 4 misses of extra points hurt him. Carlson made all his yesterday, which is ironic. But yeah, it was a strange, certainly now it looks like it was a bad choice.
Yeah, wasted. They asked Zimmer about that, like all the picks that they used. And he said, it's water off I forget the animal he used.
His back. Which I think he should have said water. I think he was trying to say it's water under the bridge, because they asked him if, it cost you a 5th point. Well, that's water under the bridge. But then he said, what? There are two different adages there.
Yeah. And I heard a take on, I think it was Common Man yesterday, that I wanted your take on. There's a few ways to look at this, and I don't want to really, belabor the point just because it's Tuesday. But they were kind of debating. I think Common Man initially said that the move with Carlson reeked of arrogance. And then, like an hour later, it seemed like he and Teneby got to a point where maybe they thought they were just not arrogant, but they overthought it, or they just got too cute.
Joe, what moved
getting rid of Forbath and bringing in Daniel Carlson,
okay.
A guy who had a up and down senior year. I don't know if they meant arrogant in that they can improve, that there's the risk benefit is so low because they're good enough to fix any problem despite all the evidence to the contrary, or if they were just arrogant in general, in the moves that they made. But that takes kind of stuck with me a little bit more than overthinking it. I don't really necessarily know, God, there's people saying that Prefer's on the hot seat, or somebody called into the show and said the problem is that Prefer had to undergo sensitivity training, and so he's too nice to these kickers now, and that's the problem.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, people are all over the place. I mean, I got chastised for saying this is why you don't bring in a rookie kicker to a Super Bowl, quote-unquote Super Bowl team, and someone said, well, why did the team sit on the ball when they could have punched it in overtime for a touchdown? And it's like, well, like Zimmer said, you expect a guy to do his job, especially at 35 yards. So I wasn't sure, like, with the close contact you have with the team, and having spoken with Prefer previously, what you thought the rationale in general was, and if you prescribed it all to arrogance or overthinking or getting too cute.
I guess I have to just look at their track record with Prefer. They had Ryan Longwell and Chris Kluwe. Granted, both those guys were older, but they were still both very effective in their jobs. And, they're always looking for the future. And I'm sure it's part of Prefer's job in the offseason to scout for more specialists, And that's where they came up with Blair Walsh, and they fell in love with his strong leg. And they said, okay, it's time to move on him. And they kind of unceremoniously let Ryan Longwell go. And then... Well, we all know what happened with the Kluwe thing, but that was more of the same. Let's find another punter and get him in here and get that guy out. His skills are gonna deteriorate and blah 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 blah. And since those moves, which were Prefer, he's the one that went out and found those guys. I shouldn't say found them. There, everybody knows they're out there, but he brought them in. They've been struggling at the positions ever since. And so they're still looking for that answer. They went ahead and got rid of Ryan Quigley this year after he having no touchbacks last year, and that was one of the problems on Sunday. You had a punter that first got one blocked, and it seemed like he took and that was not his fault, but he got the punt blocked, and then this next punt he got it off quickly and boomed it out of the end zone without the touch that you needed, and so it wasn't. It's not ideal. I think he's going to be fine, but I don't know. I don't know if that's arrogance. I don't know if that's. I would lean more towards overthinking. I mean, I probably would have. I could see him wanting to upgrade on Kai Forbath because he doesn't have the strong leg, but he was pretty much money on field goals. Kicked that 52-yarder against New Orleans last year in the play.
Arguably the biggest kick in team history.
Exactly, and so you reward that guy by sending him packing. I don't know, but it's a funny game. I mean, boy, Zimmer is a little bit reactionary when it comes to kickers, So
yeah, I feel like you get the impression, that I know some people complained that maybe he was a little too callous. The same people that were, sending hand-drawn cards to Blair Walsh after he missed that kick. In his response, which was probably the most Zimmer response to anything of all time, when they asked him about the move, he said, they asked him if it was a difficult decision, and he said, no, did you see the game yesterday? And then they asked him, well, how difficult was it? He goes, it was, pretty easy. I feel like for him, tying that into his comments about guys need to do their jobs, guys need to execute, looking at benching Trey Waynes for a bit because of that missed tackle, which we could talk about a little bit later, that, he has a very limited patience for kickers from, all the work that they put in for things to come down to that and to not work again is something that he's not going to tolerate. So,
there's no guarantees here. Dan Bailey's going to come in and make every kick and come in and make every important kick or pressure kick. There is no guarantee. I mean, he had his worst season last year as a pro, I believe, with the Cowboys. So,
and I don't think he's ever had any playoff experience. Off the top of my head, maybe he's been around 7 seasons, so I can't remember the last time the Cowboys made the playoffs. But no huge kicks.
That probably factored into their decision making too. Is I mean, in addition to the money, that he wasn't worth it, and so this is no panacea that all of a sudden the Vikings kicking woes are solved. But I think you've got to move on from this kicker, and it's best to do it now. I think you said it in a note to me earlier. Better to do it now than in week 12 or 13 when you're trying to make the postseason and even in the postseason when the pressure really mounts up. So, I think it'll be good. It's a good move. I as far as Zimmer's callousness, it was totally Zimmer. He sometimes he could have handled that better. Sometimes his emotions are so raw and he doesn't check them enough. I like the attitude. I mean, it's a business. He doesn't get the job done. We've got to move on. He could have said it. He could have been more genteel, but maybe he likes getting requoted and retweeted.
Yeah, and I mean that's exactly it. I think people lose that side of it when they think people are being too brutal. And my reaction isn't personal. I don't want necessarily. I know it goes hand in hand, but I don't want Daniel Carlson's life to be ruined. Even though this, again they go hand in hand. But at the same time, being an NFL kicker sucks. It's a really hard job. There's a ton of pressure. You're sitting there oftentimes for the entire game, and then you have to warm up, in a hostile environment, and so on and so forth. And so they get paid to do that. And when they don't do it, I don't see, this reaction where people kind of make excuses for them. And I will the last thing I will say about it was I think the key to knowing that it was too much of a project or too big of a fix was, I don't know if you saw Carlson's reaction the second he looked up and realized that he missed that kick, but I've never seen a kicker before their leg even gets back down react with a loud F word like that. It just...
He knew he missed it.
Yeah, it just seemed like, wow, that's not...
It's so much like golf, Joe. I mean,
it really is.
I come back to this a lot, and, you've got to have that muscle memory, and you've got to make adjustments of stuff, but and adjustments have to be minor when you're kicking it, but they, to fix something, you can't just overhaul your kick or your swing, and if you're not going, sometimes your body's just not going that way. And I would have think you should have started on the left hash for that last one, since the other ones were kicking right. I don't know. I don't know enough, but it's just like, make a small adjustment, get your confidence back, because if your confidence shot with a golf swing, that thing is going in the creek. Believe me.
Yeah, and Carlson did say it was his mechanics, not his, like he was, not nervous, or it wasn't a lack of confidence.
That's what, maybe that could be, but with the point you just made about him looking right up right away, I don't know if that's mechanics. I think he was. As I played golf, I hit and hope. I think that's what he was.
That's the perfect way to put it. Speaking of another guy whose career very well could have ended on Sunday, alluded to this in the intro a little bit, but Laquan Treadwell, what basically personified what you don't want your third receiver to do. You compare him to a guy like Jarius Wright, who only got his number called a few times during the season, but would always come through with clutch first downs or even touchdowns. And then you have Treadwell, who, I've been kind of against the guy since before he was on the team, and I genuinely do not take any. I would much rather be wrong about this than right, and I don't take any sort of pleasure in this, even though I do feel like I might have called this one. But his game on Sunday, for the announcer to say they need to, multiple times, actually, he said this at the end of the fourth quarter and in overtime, they need to sit him down and give him a reset, I think was his the way that he broke it down. He just had such a bad day. Starting off with that touchdown was amazing. It made you think, wow, with all these tools that the Vikings have at the wide receiver position and on offense in general, he could really, contribute and be something, especially in the red zone. I think they lined him up at the tight end position. Perfect, pass right in stride in the slot, and then the rest of it, I don't know what happened. I know that they pressed him during the week last week to step up his game. I know that he said he was disappointed in his game against the 49ers. He started strong, and then it just, he had that one short third down where Cousins was getting hit, and he had it, and it seemed like he tried to run before he actually secured the ball, and it was just kind of all downhill from there. That interception was, you can't have that, and I wanted your take on that, but I also wanted to ask you, these guys are used to getting thrown to by NFL quarterbacks, but it seemed like with him and with Coley, with the ball that went through his hands, it's almost as if the timing isn't there, or I can't imagine Cousins is throwing the ball like in some Favrean way that's so hard that they're just not used to it, but that it just seemed to be, right through their hands.
He fired that one at Treadwell. That's the only bit of a grain of salt I will give him, or leeway that I would give Treadwell, but it's very small. I mean, even Cousins said that afterwards in the post game that he had some smoke on it, and I said at the time
on the interception one.
Yeah, I said that's a bullet, but doesn't matter. He's got to catch that ball. That's what he's paid to do. That's what he does. How many times have we heard about Treadwell grinding away on the jugs machine after practice?
Yeah.
He still does. And I swear now he does it just to avoid the media. But he's got to make those plays. That's what he's paid to do. I mean, Cousins did everything to build him up, in off seasons and training camp to say, you're a part of the team. I need you. If you're open, I'm going to hit you, because that's they're going to focus on Diggs and what's his face, Thielen. And he's going to be open. That's why he was open for that touchdown. And thankful he did catch that pass. But I'm sorry. Look at Adam Thielen. How every catch he's going for. Every day he's trying to make that catch, and he's so focused in on it. As you pointed out, Treadwell ran before he had that little lollipop, that Cousins threw him. Cousins was getting hit at the time. If you can't catch that, but what he was worried about, probably going over the middle and someone going to pop him. So he wanted to turn around real quick. Bad mistake. The catch on. All he had to do was catch it and fall. He's got the first down.
Yeah.
and that maybe comes from not being experienced enough, but I think his head is every bit as messed up as Daniel Carlson's is, because you have to, even later in the game he had another drop that was right to him, and I saw him coming up holding his finger because it looked like it got jammed a little bit, and that was just poor mechanics catching the ball. I mean, his finger should be spread wide open. Catching the ball is first. Quit thinking about what you're going to do with it. Catch the ball. I mean, that's 101 receiving. If he doesn't know that by now, I don't see him being back next year. I think they're going to limp along with him this year, and he's probably going to get demoted. As you got out of the agenda, we have that new receiver to talk about. But it is a mental thing. It is. For whatever reason, now granted, he goes up and he talks afterwards, and everybody goes, he's a stand-up guy to answer the questions. Well, at some time, do what you're supposed to do. And it's so fortunate for him that he finally breaks through with a touchdown pass, and then he just soils it for the rest of the game. It's bad for him, but man, there's plenty of other guys out there that can make that catch, and I bet you the Vikings just signed one.
I found it interesting, too, that they kept giving him opportunities. I wasn't sure if that was because they didn't have any other option, or the plays that they wanted to run, maybe Coley wasn't, or even Zylstra. I'm not sure if he dressed or not. I'm sure he did. If they were, the guys that could fill in at the third position. I know that they asked Cousins why he kept feeding the ball to Treadwell after he kept blowing it, and he said, I look at my progressions, and if it's the third guy, it's the third guy. I'm going to get him the ball, whether or not he, if he can't make the catch. This is how he didn't say this, but this is what I took from it. The decision to not give him the ball comes from the coaches. Then he should be benched. If he's on the field, I'm going to try to continue to get him the ball.
Absolutely, you have to. That's how the position of quarterback works. You're exactly right. I mean, that's what he's got to do. I was watching the Bears game last night, and they're talking about the first week how the Bears against the Packers, how Trubisky had his number 4 receiver wide open in the end zone, and they could have won the game, and he looked away from him, and it's because they were saying he's thinking that's my 4th receiver, so there's somebody else I got to get the ball to, and if he does that, they win the game. Well, Cousins is that kind of player that he knows where everybody's going to be. He knows how to get through his progressions quickly, make that decision. And if he's not looking at numbers and saying, I don't want to throw that guy, he sucks. But, I don't think you have time to make that decision, do you?
Yeah, no. In the heat of the game, I don't think he's going to have the...
That's he tweeted me poorly. I'm not throwing him the ball.
That takes a second level of thought that would take too much time, and I know Cousins was getting a little bit of guff for holding onto the ball a little too long in the first half. But at that point in the game, it looked like everything Cousins was doing was automatic, and for him to overrule that impulse, he shouldn't have to do it. And so that was kind of what my question was. I don't understand why they didn't get Treadwell out of there. I also don't really understand why they went out and signed this new receiver when they have guys, they were kind of loaded at the position. Chad Beebe's on the practice squad. They could bring him up. I know he has a history with Cousins, and so maybe Cousins really highly recommended him. And so his name is Aldrich Robinson. I think that he most recently played for the 49ers, but he was in Washington for a couple seasons with Cousins, and the rap on him is that he's a really good deep threat. So, me, how I am with receivers, especially deep threat receivers, and seeing that aspect of the game come back a lot more against the Packers than it has in a really long time. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, he's almost 30 is probably the rap on him. He's probably not as fast down the field as he used to be. But
I wonder I'll look up his 40 time. But, the thing with the third receiver is, you don't need him to hit home runs. You just need him to move the chains every once in a while.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are like, oh, they should get Josh Gordon. It's like, do you really want to add that to your locker room? But, he could be a guy that at 5'10", could fill in at the slot if he's a speedster. He doesn't necessarily need to go down the field.
Right. The point, you brought up Coley earlier, and my thought there is that there isn't a lot of chemistry there yet between Coley and Cousins, because Coley was second team or injured or whatever the heck throughout camp, and so maybe there's some, they're going to probably start working to build that up now. But that may be the reason they picked this guy up, because there is some chemistry between these two guys, and you better have that established, because you're already into the season. So maybe that's maybe why it makes sense to me. I don't know, but yeah, it's like I said, this is the first big sign that Treadwell is gone. They can't not going to eat his contract this year. They'll keep him around, just and have him go work on the jugs machine. I don't know what, but it was really disappointing to see it. He should have just been jacked and ready. So give me some more, and to not make those catches, it reeks of a lack of confidence to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and what's amazing is, even though I just said that a third guy doesn't get a lot of opportunities, I think Treadwell had six targets. Yeah, or throwing up the greatest segue of all time. But that's a significant amount of targets. I think Cousins again, and this we'll get into one of our segments, which is Tuesday's Tales of the Tape. And I think we were going to start off with Cousins' line.
No, I'm not that. I'm going to. Since we already talked Carlson and Treadwell, let me run through those numbers real quick, and we can get them out of the way, and then we can go into Cousins. Carlson was 0 for 3 on field goals, 48, 49, and 35. He was 3 for 3 from extra points. And those are 33-yard kicks. Can't make a 35-yarder. So that what's the deal? That you don't need much more explanation than that. And ironically, across the field, Crosby was 5 of 6, and he would have had 6 field goals had they not called the timeout on him.
Best icing ever.
That's what you want from your kicker, and to go up there and do what he did. Well, we've already discussed it. Treadwell, meanwhile, was 2 catches for 23 yards, and one of them was a TD. Most of the catches were on that one. But he had 6 targets, as you just mentioned, 6 targets, and he dropped 3 of them.
He could have had a pretty significant day. I mean, if you're not or even if you are in a PPR league, he could have been a decent flex guy moving forward. And, I'm not trying to imply that Cousins is going to put up damn near 500 yards every week. We don't want him to. But yeah, I mean, everything was there for him to have a monster day for him. Right. And it's just really too bad, because Cousins, he was on another level that fourth quarter.
Speaking of a monster, that was Cousins, 35 of 48 for 425 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick that wasn't his fault for 118.8. I mean, imagine if Treadwell catches that pass rather than it gets picked.
Yeah.
That rating goes way up. For Cousins.
He would have had a 150 or whatever. He would have been close to one of the top ratings you can get. I do think something that you don't see in the stat line was his resiliency. Coming I think the first drive after that blocked punt was a touchdown for the Vikings. That was the Treadwell touchdown. And then he throws the pick, comes out, almost throws a second pick that gets called back, and then he marches down the field and has, some of the most beautiful throws. And I'm a homer, I get it, but some of those throws that he made, the one to Thielen was,
pretty risky, but boy, oh boy, since it worked out, it looks great. I mean, you watch that thing on replay, and it boggles the mind how it got in there.
Yeah, a split second, one way or the other, and it wouldn't have worked.
Cousins was everything we were looking for. I thought he was a little nervous on the first series. Probably it didn't work out for him. I thought he started to settle in after that, and in the second half he just strafed that defense. With passes. I mean, between Diggs and Thielen, and then even Kyle Rudolph. He was he stretched the field with the first two, and then Kyle Rudolph was getting all this stuff underneath, which was fantastic. Treadwell should have been getting some of that, but he kept dropping it, and Cousins was putting the ball in catchable places. Last week I thought he had a couple high throws that his receivers helped him out, and the touchdown pass to Diggs was thrown, so I'm not going to say everything was perfect. Diggs made an incredible shoestring catch.
Oh, the first one?
That was something. Yeah. But second Diggs touchdown was a thing of beauty. Oh, my goodness. How long have we waited for that, Joe?
In stride. We talked about that, I think, last week or the week before, the aspect of Diggs' game that's been lost, which is his deep ball. And on that play, when he realized the ball was coming to him, you could see him hit a second gear. That was just, they do these stats now where they put these little computer chips in players' shoulder pads, and two of the Vikings were in the top 5 for the fastest plays from last season. I think Diggs was second or third with a top end speed of like 24 miles per hour. And he doesn't get a lot of credit for that top end speed. More of a guy who runs amazing routes, which he did on that first touchdown. That route was sick too, and on the 2-point conversion, his route was immaculate. But it was something where, again, going back to the text with you talking me off the ledge, I kind of looked at it and said, like you said, they should have lost this game. They got a tie. We saw Cousins kind of with his coming out party. He made up for the 10% in completions he didn't have last weekend. His career average is like 65. He was at 55 last week. This week he almost was at 75% completions. I think he was at like 73% or 72.9 or something, just gaudy, which is amazing considering he threw the ball almost 50 frickin' times. And so I wanted to shoehorn my new segment into your segment.
Why?
Exponential segments, because it's probably the best time to bring it up. And so when the Vikings win, I'm going to do a fortunately, unfortunately. And when they lose, I'm going to do an unfortunately, fortunately. And when they tie, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I thought that, the fortunate part of this game obviously was Cousins' stat line. He was poised. He kept bouncing back from all these like huge momentum swings that historically the Vikings would have folded afterwards. The unfortunately was the fact that the running game continued to kind of churn out blah numbers. And so, obviously they had to throw the ball. They were behind. Cook got hurt. I think Latavius Murray still had a pretty decent yards per carry, but they didn't use him much. It reminded me of before the season. I said that Cousins could very well have a 5,000-yard season, but if he does, that's probably not the best thing for the team from a balance standpoint, or that would imply something is not working from the run game perspective. And Luke Braun, who co-hosts the Purple Journal podcast with us, said last week that basically we just have to realize that this team, from a run block perspective, isn't very good, and that we're kind of just gonna have to deal with those, 3 yards per carry, 2.5 yards per carry type stuff. So I wanted your take on the all of that. The thoughts on the run game. I think that. Was it Everson Griffin or no? It was Latavius Murray was on KFAN this morning, and he said the team couldn't get into a rhythm in the first half, and a lot of that was penalties, which we'll touch on. But the other part of that is they just weren't running the ball very well, and there was a lot of drop passes too. But just where you're at with the running game after week 2.
Well, I think we know that this line has been called a better pass blocking line than a run blocking line, which is ironic because last year it was kind of the opposite. And I think getting Elflein back could change that, and hopefully we will see him this week. I'm not sure. It's not Wednesday yet, so we don't know what's going on out there at practice. But it's kind of confusing. I've always thought that every lineman prides himself first in being a run blocker. You know, they like to plow ahead. I mean, backpedaling to pass protect is much more difficult, and you have to be quite the athlete to do so. But you know, if you're a road grader,
proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, if you're a road grader, you can just plow ahead and open a hole. And you know, I think too a little bit it is on Cook because, and I'm not blaming him. I mean, he's coming back from a devastating injury. I don't think he's back to his explosiveness yet, and probably doesn't feel total confidence in cutting like he did, you know, last year. I mean, he used to be through the line, boom, and make a cut, and he's finding the open hole. But I think that he's going to take him a while to really get back up to speed, and that's why I think at times Latavius looks better because he can push open the holes that aren't there. Whereas Cook is not doing that yet. He's not able to because he has to use finesse, whereas Murray can use power. So I mean, it's a little of both, and you know, they had injuries on the line. Rashad Hill went out, and you had Brian O'Neill come in, who I thought acquitted himself quite well, but came in late. But you know, so we'll see what happens there. You know, it was a good sign to see that they could plug him in, but I think, you know, if he's in there for a long term, it might hurt him a little bit because he's got some growing pains he's got to go through as well. But yeah, I think they'll get there. They'll get better. But you know, probably they miss Easton too. Easton was a very athletic and powerful left guard, and so not having him in there is a big thing. I mean, the left guard right now is Tom Compton, so I mean, he is there.
Do you think they might go with Elflein at guard and keep Jones at center?
I heard that, and I find that strange. You know, I don't know. Maybe they will. I guess it's a matter of we should probably look up on PFF and see how Jones is doing as a center. And but I mean, I don't pay that much attention to him, or else we'll ask Luke, because who does focus on the line on Wednesday. But you know, I've heard people talk about that, and I just thought that was kind of strange right out of the gate. But maybe if Brett Jones goes a couple games more as center, then that's the thing to do. But you know, because you know, Elflein, they probably like him to pull. You know, if he was going to be a guard, they like him to pull, and he's pretty athletic and he can move, so maybe that's the right spot for him. I don't know.
And if Jones and Cousins have a good rapport too, that why switch that up if you don't need to? I guess. Not that that's the most difficult thing in the world, but
So can I finish my tales? Come on, Joe.
Here's my other new segment. It's called Blocking Joe's segment. Yeah. What was up next? Penalties, I believe.
I didn't want to hammer on them. Penalties. I mean, the Vikings were 8 for 70, and you know, you can't have that and win ball games. But the two penalties I really wanted to talk about were, which everybody's talking about, is the Eric Kendricks hit on the quarterback and the Clay Matthews hit on the Vikings quarterback. So, you know,
poetic justice.
Yeah, well, for them, but you know, I mean, Kendricks, that was not a penalty, and neither was Clay Matthews. You know, neither one. And I'm really hopeful that the league looks at how this, you know, and how players are reacting to this, and how they're pulling up, and they're requiring to not play football. But you know, I just think it's goofy because you can't. I understand that, you know, you got to have your quarterbacks in there, but it's part of the game. You got to be able to hit them, because that's how teams win. You know, they get the quarterback rattled so that by later in the game, when you think they're coming, you can't make the big plays, and that's part of the way the game's played. It doesn't have to be violent, but it should be vicious. You know, there should be some hitting involved. It's a tackling game. So anyway,
I saw on Reddit this morning that the refs were going to be using the Kendricks video to educate themselves on the penalty. And I wasn't sure if that meant that they were going to say educate themselves on what not to call or what to call. I got the vibe that it was the latter, and it was because people were basically saying, you know, for all the Packers fans complaining or whatever. And another part of that, and I said poetic justice, is just that, you know, they call it the Aaron Rodgers rule for a reason. And maybe if he didn't make such a big deal out of that bar hit, which I also, even the guy, the color commentator said, the bar hit was a completely legal hit, and maybe he was speaking technically because it wasn't a penalty at that point. Now it would be, but I still don't think that bar drove his weight through him. I think he rolled right over the top of him.
I wouldn't say he drove him, but I would say he fell on him with all his weight. I would certainly say he did that.
Yeah, but then, God, that's such a slippery slope, though. Like you said, isn't that what a tackle is?
I don't know how I don't know how linemen can change. I don't know how you can pull up and still effectively tackle somebody if you're racing in there to get him in the split-second opportunity you have, and suddenly you have to pull up and twist and not fall on him and try to arm tackle him to the ground. It makes no sense. It can. I don't think it can be physically done. Me
and my dad were talking about that yesterday, and he said they have to coach these guys, and I'm like, well, would it be the next generation of kids maybe that were taught to tackle that way? But you're right, because people don't understand that, going into a tackle, these guys are thinking, am I applying enough pressure to get this guy on the ground? And so sometimes they overdo it, but that's just because they want to make sure that they get, a quarterback like maybe Big Ben down to the ground. It's not, most of the time they're not doing it maliciously, they're doing it because of that reason. So yeah, like you said, when you're in mid-tackle with gravity, it's like next to impossible to stop. And then, you have to worry about coming in too light and the guy getting rid of the ball, or maybe not getting a turnover because of it.
Hopefully it serves like the previous year's rule changes serve to get the really egregious and vicious hits out of the game. I mean, what's his face? Zendejo, meeting with his helmet. I mean,
he's got to stop doing that.
I'm sure he'll get a fine this week, and hopefully that will get him help him figure out that you can't be doing that. And that stuff should be out of the game for his own sake as well as anybody else's. I mean, that's a great way to break your neck.
I think you mentioned in your wrap-up article too that he did pull it back on another hit later in the game. I must have missed that one.
Yes, I thought he did. That's what it looked like to me. So I thought, okay, the guy's coachable. But I mean, and I hope this serves to maybe, put a new mindset in on tacklers when you're going after the quarterback. But you cannot keep calling plays like that. And they affected the outcome with the Clay Matthews hit. And I don't think that was a illegal hit. The Vikings caught a break there. They'd have lost the game for sure if that interception goes through. So that's what they have to look at and see where maybe you just change the mindset of players, but I don't think you can legislate tackling out of the game. Tackling quarterbacks is just it's going to affect the game more adversely. You're going to have people that are going to stop watching. Not me, but
yeah. I wonder where this all leads in 10 or 20 years, and if it turns into some sort of, two-hand touch sort of league. And I think officiating, as much as I was happy about the call just because it gave the team new life, and thereby me new life, but I always thought officiating's main goal was not to dictate the outcome of a game. And, that was such a borderline call. Anyway, it wasn't like super egregious, like you said. It wasn't something that was so blatant they had to call it. I also agree that I don't think it really was a penalty. But even that having been said, then even if it was 50-50, you would think they would say, well, we can't dictate the outcome of the game this way. But they did it, and that happened. And I found it interesting that they would do that in Green Bay, but.
My final tale of the tape is the defensive numbers, which I thought, Zimmer was pretty upset. Well, not pretty upset. He was not happy totally with his defense, and certainly not that there was not 29 points on the board. But they weren't all on the defense.
Nope.
The first 7 were not. They were a special teams block kick that resulted in. So you take those off, it's 22 points. And here's the numbers. Pack had 351 yards total, which isn't terrible when you're playing Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau Field, and 253 passing. That's not bad. But the Vikings were held them to 4 of 13 in third downs, which is pretty darn good. And
yeah.
They only gave up the 1 touchdown. It was bend don't break, and if you can do that, force them to kick 5 field goals rather than Aaron Rodgers putting it into the end zone, that's a pretty dang good day. They had troubles with the covering Jimmy Graham in some tight spot, in some crucial spots, and Zimmer was mostly pissed about that. But in general, I can't knock that as a bad game, even though they gave up a heck of a lot more points than their average last year and the first game. So, but there you go.
Yeah, I did find it interesting on seeing like a Mackenzie Alexander cover Jimmy Graham, because there's like a literal foot difference there. They were lining him up as a wide receiver, like we mentioned on the preview show last week. They might do, because that's what they've always done. How many do you have his stats on hand? Like how many? What Graham ended up with? I know Davante Adams is, I think he's leading the league in touchdowns over the course of the last season and a half or 2 seasons or something.
He caught 6 passes for 95 yards. The yardage was the tops on the team, and he had 8 targets. So, that was one of my things I thought they had to do, was hold him down, and they kept him out of the end zone, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't keep him. Davante Adams was 8 for 64. He was the second leader, and Geronimo Allison was 6 for 64.
How did you think? What did you think was the reason behind Trey Waynes getting benched for that play? It seemed, like that was one of the things where people said the Vikings should have challenged because the receiver's knee was down, and maybe he let up because he thought he downed the receiver.
That in my post game wrap, I said, that was one thing that they missed. The broadcast team saw it. And when they replayed it, he was obviously down. He had his knee on the ground, and they touched him there, and it was right in front of the Viking sideline. How do you not? Isn't there anybody screaming? Challenge that thing? That was a huge mistake, I thought.
That was a big play too.
Yeah, it was. It was a big first down, and that's not on Trey Waynes. To be honest, when you put that on the agenda, I did not realize that he was benched. I thought he might have tweaked his knee, and they were just giving him some time off. But yeah, after a while, you didn't see him much, I guess. I don't know. Is that what? Do we know that he was benched?
I haven't heard it from the team. I've heard it from on the internet, lots of different places. For whatever that's worth, I would take. He I think he was on the wrong end of a touchdown that got called back. But at the same point, the first touchdown, the Davante Adams touchdown, was against Xavier Rhodes, so it's not like nobody's perfect. I just thought it was interesting if that was, Zimmer is known as a cornerback guru. That's not like some spicy take. Everybody knows that, but maybe he just has a shorter leash in that regard for his guys. I know people were saying that Waynes was playing off the ball a lot, maybe after a week when you have a guy like Hughes who's a little bit more aggressive, and Mackenzie Alexander is aggressive as well. Maybe he was just tired of Waynes's playing off the ball too much. I'm not sure.
I wonder if that'll come up. You have to at least maybe factor the injury in there a little bit, and if he was not, responding enough and staying with and playing off because the guy is going to get burned, that they said, okay, we better get you out of here till you're ready to go. I don't know. We likely won't find out unless someone asks. But
and we find out first thing about injuries tomorrow.
Yeah, they have to post their first injury report on Wednesday.
I've seen that the word, at least yesterday, was that the Cook was a hamstring, not serious, and Rashad Hill was not serious. I saw maybe it was an ankle. I know he got kind of rolled up on or something, but it doesn't seem like either of those are going to be.
That's what Zimmer said right after the game. He said, they're not serious, but then he doesn't like to talk about injuries anyway, so...
I noticed that Hughes returned a punt late in the game, and I was wondering if that was because he had some success in the kick return game, or if Sherrill's hamstring was flaring up as well. Because it seemed, he left a couple He wasn't as aggressive as Sherrills is in regards to fair catches and running up and grabbing the ball, and he got lucky with some bounces, but there was at least once where he really should have run up and fair caught the ball as opposed to letting the Packers down it. But it didn't end up mattering, but considering the tight leash they had on everybody, you would have thought that maybe Sherrills would have been out there late in the game.
Well, he got hurt, and it wasn't his hamstring. I heard he got dinged up. He might even had a concussion. I'm not sure, but he got on one of the kicks. He got either bent up pretty good or hurt, and I didn't get the full word on it. But they mentioned it to Zimmer afterwards, and he said I didn't think it was that serious. So, I'll probably see him back this week. But yeah, he was replaced because of injury, nothing else.
Yeah. So was there any other topics that you wanted to cover? I know I had 3 reasons for the comeback, but we've touched on those: the bend don't break defense, the deep ball coming back, and just the versatility. Just to hammer that home a little bit more, I thought it was, I said this a lot last season. This I think that my quote was always, "This is the most anti-Vikings team I've ever seen." There was just so many opportunities for the Vikings to be the Vikings yesterday, and granted, they ended up being the Vikings with the missed field goals and stuff, but it was still, like I said, it was a silver lining game. I think that, things are it'll be a net positive when we look back on what happened this week, especially with some of these other games going on. The Bears look a lot better. They should be 2-0. They could have very well beat the Packers. They beat the Seahawks last night. Trubisky's kind of doing what they want him to do. I think he had 2 picks, but other than that, he's been serviceable. The Lions are a hot mess. But any thoughts on other teams, the NFC in general, Tampa Bay being scary all of a sudden?
Well, I wrote a story for the Sports Post last night, and kind of branching off the idea that if you're 0-2 to start the season, you only have 11%, 10.9% chance of making the playoffs. At least that's the way it's been since the previous 91 teams that I can't remember how far back the stats go.
Yeah, anyway, I think if you're 2-0, you're 75% chance of making the playoffs, so that makes sense.
And you're 0-2, and so I looked at all those, and 2 of those teams, there were 7 0-2 teams right now, and so there was 3 other ones that have not, or 2 others that don't have a win, the Steelers and the Browns, because they had a tie and a loss, and I put in the Bears and the Lions in this group. The Lions are 0-2, and the Bears are 1-1. I thought, I watched that game last night with the Bears, and they did look good at times. The defense is great. The defense is very good. I mean, with Mack on there, and they were already a top 10 defense last year, so that they're going to keep them in games. But Trubisky's got some things to learn. He's got the tools, but he's still just a second quarterback, and so a little inconsistent from time to time. One of the touchdowns for the Bears was a pick 6. So
okay.
So I said, next year maybe. They might be, they'll make some improvements and they'll be challenging for this division. But in a division with the Packers and the Vikings, it's going to be a tough climb for both of those teams. The Lions, I just didn't understand them that first week. And they played a little bit better against San Francisco, but their defense gave up 30 points again. So Matt Patricia is, not the defensive guru, has not got it going over in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting that the team, I think it was the Jets that the Lions played week 1, basically came out afterwards and said that they knew all of Stafford's signals. I mentioned this on the show last week too, which would have been nice if they didn't put that out there just for the Vikings' sake, considering the Vikings have struggled to beat the Lions in the past few years. But yeah, going into Chicago has always been hard. With the defense like that, it sounds like Khalil Mack is getting in shape a little bit more too. I know he kind of had that huge first half, week 1, and then I think, as you put it, was sucking air a lot in the second half.
And he played the game last night, so.
Yeah, the NFC North is tough. The Rams look really good. That'll be the game after this weekend. We will be breaking down the Bills game on Friday morning. But with a couple minutes left, was there anything in particular that you wanted to see? I know people were mentioning, had they not gotten rid of Carlson, that maybe the Vikings would have elected to kick a bunch of field goals instead of just going for touchdowns against the Bills, just to try to work things out in his head, which is completely ridiculous. I don't think any NFL team would pull up on a touchdown just to kick a bunch of field goals. And if you're at that point, what are you doing with that kicker?
They did what most NFL teams would do. They assessed it, saw that this is not going to work. Went with ghosts of Blair Walsh still nestled in their brain. They said, we got to move. And with Dan Bailey sitting out there, I mean, like you said, one of the most
I guess 4 teams had reached out to him before the Vikings did, something I didn't mention, and he just kept saying that it wasn't the right fit, or he was waiting for the right team. I also it was between us and the Rams, so it was kind of cool that he decided to go with the
Did the Rams contact him?
That was the rumor. I heard that again on K-Fan this morning. I know for a fact that obviously the Browns did. I think.
It's interesting that it came to the Vikings that if he did, as soon as I heard that Zerline went down and torched my fantasy team, again, I'm still bitter, that I thought, oh, shoot, now the Vikings might not get a chance in them because they've got playoff aspirations too. Maybe they have less cap space.
I was going to say, with all the guys they brought in, maybe they couldn't afford as much.
Exactly. So I was surprised the Vikings could, because apparently Bailey wanted $3 million from Dallas, but the Vikings only have 2.7 space available, so they had to probably do some.
And do the Rams play outside?
Yes.
So maybe that was it, because he's used to playing indoors.
And they play in front of virtually nobody. They'll be in front of Luke Braun next in a week and a half. But,
pretty much. But yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for listening. If you are looking to go to the game this weekend, check out our new tickets page. We'll have a few different discounts from different services that you can use. So you should be able to find the best price in town, just because we're getting anywhere from 15 to 50% off discounts on those pages. And definitely check us out on Friday. We'll be recording at 9:30. If you're new to the show this week, the way it works is that we typically record on Tuesday morning, looking back at the game from that previous weekend, and then on Fridays we look forward towards the game the upcoming weekend, and we should maybe
next week, though, Joe. That'll change next week because
that is correct.
Yeah.
So we have a Thursday night game, so we might have to record Thursday morning. And I believe our schedule will be different as well, because I know, Joe, you had some stuff to do. We might do a 9 o'clock start, I think, next Tuesday, if I recall correctly. But just keep an eye on our social media, on our sites. We'll keep you guys in the loop. But yeah, we would definitely appreciate any shares or comments or feedback. We really appreciate that you're listening to our show, and we hope to grow and build on what we've started. It's been pretty cool so far. So this has been Morning Joe's. Thanks for listening, and check us out on Friday at 9:30.